David Uosikkinen in the Pocket is sponsored by the School of Rock Main Line. I'd like to thank the School of Rock Main Line, located at 511 Old Lancaster Road in Berwyn. You can visit their website at schoolofrock.com. Ask for Dave Marsh or Rick Allison.
Everybody, I'm Andy Weinberg, and welcome to episode 124 of the David Uosikkinen in the Pocket podcast. Got the gang back together. It's been a little while Dave was out touring Europe with the Hooters, but it's good to see everybody again. Dave and of course Fred, and I know Fred is particularly excited about this week's guest because it's somebody you know very, very well, Fred. Well, first before we bring him on, I just want to. Dave, how's everything going? How was the tour?
It was great, and thanks for asking. Yeah, it was really great. Great to see you guys. I got home. I think it's I got home last Monday or Monday before? We were gone for almost 6 weeks, and I think we played 24 shows, and Switzerland with a show. No, most of the shows were in Germany, but we did a show in Switzerland. And well received, and the band played great, and we just had a really, really great time. But it's always great to get home. You know, we're home. We got a few local shows coming up, but unlike last year. Last year I got home, and I think a few days later I got on a tour bus, and we're out playing the States. This year I get a chance to enjoy the summer and see my friends and hang out a little bit before, and we have a couple local things to do, and so it's great.
You did that show with Low Cut Connie. I saw you. They played All You Zombies and brought you up to play. That was awesome.
Yeah, we did that, and we did what is it? Sally Saying Something with Adam, of course, which was really, really a lot of fun. I mean, his band is terrific. He's terrific, and that was a fun project to do with him. It's funny. I really learned a lot working with him. He's a very interesting, smart, has an identity when it comes to what he wants to do musically. He's not a rules guy, which really, after all these years of doing things a certain way, it kind of was like a throwback to working with somebody like Kuzma or something like that, having let's try it like this. And I really enjoyed myself, so it was fun. And we had a great gig last week. It was cool.
That's great. Well, that's actually a great segue to our guest, because speaking of a very smart guy and very musically gifted and not afraid to try different things and able to work in so many different genres. So his name is Brendan Mcgeehan. He's an engineer. He's a producer. He's a bass player, and he's involved in so many things. And as I said, he's played with Fred in a bunch of projects. So here he is. Great, Brendan Mcgeehan. Brendan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, gentlemen. Thanks so much for having me.
Gentlemen, who are you talking to? How you doing, Brendan?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
Great.
Really.
Yeah. Busy, right? You've been real busy working. And I saw Rob today because our equipment came in from Europe. I took a couple of weeks to get back, and I helped them load in, and I thought maybe I'd see you, but the studio was dark today. So, but I could feel your vibe in there when I was there.
Yes. So, yeah. This is try to take today off as much as I can, but otherwise I'm usually there most days.
Yeah. Very cool.
For those who don't know, Dave's talking about Rob Hyman, and Brendan, you're the engineer at Rob's studio there. So how long has that been? How long have you been working with Rob?
So I've been making records at Elm Street for a little over 10 years. And I was, it was like one of a few studios that I would use in the area, depending on, a few different factors. And then the last few years, Rob and I were getting closer, working on some projects, and he approached me with the opportunity of doing more projects there. And it's always been my favorite studio in Philly. And so I kind of had the opportunity to move in there, and it's been a dream, just an amazing opportunity of a lifetime to work there.
That's great. Yeah, it's really great.
Awesome place.
Awesome.
The other great thing, and which is why it's perfect timing to have Brendan on, is I know you've been involved in music, for forever, and you've just put out your first album as a solo project. correct? This is your first. It's Peace Fortress is the name of the project. The album is New Moon, and we're going to talk a lot about it. But I mean, how's that feel to you're so often involved in other people's projects, and now this one's your baby. I mean, what was that like, and what was the it's out now. It sounds great. It's an instrumental album. It's really cool sounding stuff. But just kind of give us a little bit of the story of Peace Fortress and how it came to be, and what it feels like now to have it out there for the world.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting because I do work on a lot of projects, and when I first started this project, I didn't listen to it for like almost a year because we cut everything in like basically one night for the most part, which we can talk about how that worked. And then I didn't listen to anything for almost a year because I was afraid that like it wasn't any good. And then we also had a daughter, so like that was also a big part of our time. And then once I finally cracked it open and started listening to it, and then I started working on it a little bit, and I started getting a little excited about it. So I would like, to close friends, I would just sort of leak out that like, hey, I think I have a thing that I'm working on. It might be a record. And people got very interested in that. And I was surprised because I didn't know why it was different than any other project that I work on, because every record I work on is a collaboration. In the studio, it's very collaborative. So, but then I started getting really into it and putting the show together and getting all the final touches in. I was like, wow, this feels really good to have something that is mine, that I'm kind of expressing music that I don't get to express in any other setting and any other projects that I'm working on. So it was a total blast to put it together, and I can't wait to do it again, frankly.
I'm curious about when you mentioned you recorded it in a day. Elaborate on that a little bit, would you?
So the concept that I had was to call in a few players who I haven't played with very much, but players that I really admire, and players who hadn't played together as a unit before. And I just kind of wanted to see what would happen. And so I called in Adrian Harpham to play drums, Logan Roth to play keyboards, and Will Brown to play guitar. And the four of us got together at Elm Street, and we just set up a bunch of different stations so people could play whatever instrument they were feeling. And I brought some sketches with me of just some loose ideas that I had been kicking around, and said, like, maybe we could start with these, but I don't want to be tied to them. Like, let's just go where it goes. And I knew that those guys would know how to do that. They could exist in different contexts. They're great session players, but they also can just go somewhere else with it entirely, and they're great listeners. So we went through all of the ideas that I brought, and then we took a little meal break, and I was kind of like, I feel cool. Like, you guys were doing me a favor coming in here. I feel so special that they said yes. And then they were like, well, why don't we just keep playing? So then we kept jamming and just came up with completely improvised material. And that turned into a couple of cuts on the record as well. So after, it was not even a day, it was like an evening of just jamming with these guys, that I had a record. And I didn't know that I just had a bunch of material. And so, as I said, I didn't open it for many, many months because I didn't know what it was. And then I started opening it, and I started chipping away at it because everything was very long, because we would play for a long time. And I started cutting things down into structures and more songs that made more sense. And then I thought, well, then maybe I could add some elements here. So then I called in some friends, one of which is on the podcast with us, Freddie B. And I really wanted him to be a part of it. And there were a couple other people that I was kind of hearing their voice, their instrumental voice, since it's an instrumental album. I was hearing them on some of the other tunes. And so after I had cut things down, I asked some friends to overdub their parts on it. And then it started to feel like it was a record, and it was coming to shape. And so that's pretty much how it worked.
That's cool. I mean, that sounds like art.
Eric Bazillion was one of the guys too, right? He came in and played on Seagulls.
Yeah. So I knew Eric a little bit, but then I got to know Eric much better when we were doing the last Hooters record, Rockin' and Swing. Eric and I spent a lot of time together, as did with Davey and as did Rob, because we cut that record mostly in 2 weeks, and then it was like maybe a month with some overdubs and things like that. And so Eric and I got to talking about like the Ventures and other surf rock, and he's a big fan. And so one of the concepts that I wanted to sort of incorporate into this project is surf rock, which has been a love of mine since I was a teenager.
I didn't know that. I had no idea. I spent 20 years in California, and when I was in California, I played with bands that were doing mostly like it was a complete, couldn't be more different than the Hooters, but it was surf rock bands and the Mud Sharks and the Tiki Tortures and Paul Johnson, and it was all that thing, which I had no idea that you were into that. It's very cool.
Yeah, I first learned about Dick Dale when I was like in middle school, I think.
Yeah,
and it was like the coolest thing I'd ever heard.
The loudest guitar player I ever heard in my life.
Absolutely.
Oh my God! I mean, I'm telling you, that guy. I played a gig with him once at in San Juan Capistrano. You know that club there, Freddie, in San Juan Capistrano. It's been there. It's been forever. You've played there. You had to have played there. I'm forgetting the name of the place, but Dick Dale. We played with Dick Dale, and it was like I thought the wall was going to come down. And I played with Leslie West, so this was the loudest thing I ever heard in my life. So I'm sorry for interrupting when you talked about Dick Dale.
Guys, real quick, how does a middle schooler discover Dick Dale? It's not like you're hearing him on Top 40 radio or something,
right,
or even classic rock radio. How did you discover Dick Dale in middle school?
Yeah, I was lucky. My dad was a real music guy. And so he turned me on to Dick Dale among many other artists that I still listen to. Oh. And so he just got me started. And then he actually brought me to see him for the first time in New York. And he had to call ahead and make sure it was cool that I could get in because I was 13.
Oh, wow.
And then there was one time he was playing in my hometown and I really wanted to go, but I didn't have an adult that could go with me. And so
I was going to ask you to tell that story. This is great.
So I called ahead. It was a bar that had music, and I called ahead and I was like, I really want to come to the show. I promise you, I don't want to drink alcohol. I just want to come for the music. I'm such a fan. And so I was able to get a hold of the manager of the bar, and he said, all right, show up. It was an hour or two before doors. And I did. And he pulls over a bar stool and he pulls it 10 feet away from the bar, all the way in the back, as far away from the bar as it could be. And he said, sit here and don't get up. don't even think about it. Yeah. And that was enough for me. And I saw Dick Dale many times, and it was just he had a holster of guitar picks because he would grind through them because he played such heavy gauge strings and he playing with that technique that's so fast. So he would grind them to a nub, throw them out to the audience, pick another one out and keep grinding. Wow. One time I got to shake his hand, and his hands were massive. They were catcher's mitts. It was just I couldn't believe it. And just the sound of it, that spring reverb Stratocaster thing. Yeah. It was I was so, captured by that. So it's a sound that's always been with me ever since then, but I'm not really able to get that out in other projects. Wow. So bringing it back around to Eric, I had asked him, to play not a sound like Dick Dale. I wanted him to sound like him, and I think he does on the track he plays on, but he's got that surf rock vocabulary. And so when I showed him the melody that was going after, and then he made it his and he embellished it, and it was such a cool moment for me. And I was, again, with all these people that I've asked to be a part of it, with except for Freddie, because we work together all the time, I didn't mind asking him to be a part of it and hope that he said yes. But everyone else, I was like, I don't know if this is okay. And everyone has said yes. Everyone was so wonderful to be a part of it. And so it's I've been super lucky in that way to have some really talented people that said that they would lend their part.
That's super cool.
I added Seagulls to my summer music playlist. So after listening to your album this week, so it's good.
Did you ever have you ever been to NAMM? Have you ever been to NAMM?
I never have. No,
I remember. Well, I remember for years when I was out there, I almost went out every year, and I remember. I guess it was in the '90s. Dick Dale would hold court up there. He would there was this little area. I remember, I guess after a while, they said, we just got to give him his own space. And it's huge, and he'd have his amps set up over there, and you'd go up. So I remember it was the one year I remember I was the fifth floor of the convention center. There was Dick Dale up there with his amps, and he was playing and meeting people, and just wild, man. I mean, the guy was just a force, and playing clubs, and he was a kind of, he seemed to play all the time,
I think he did like pretty much till the very end. He was like just a total road dog. And, and just one of those singular guitar players that nobody else sounded like him. Nobody else sounds like him today.
Yeah. A couple of young guys. I remember his rhythm section was a couple of young dudes that just like were playing ferocious, you know. It was like, holy crap, you know, these guys were just banging and they were really great. And that's very cool that's one of your inspirations, you know, one of the many, but that's very cool that inspired you. Love it.
Brendan, talk a little bit about the band, the three-piece band that you had with Anthony and
Oh yeah. So one of the other guys that I wanted to be on my record is my old friend Anthony Latanzi, and we met in college and we were playing in bands together ever since we were 18, since we were freshmen. And we were in a trio for a while, like a power trio thing. And I think that sound has always been with me too. And that was something that I wanted to sort of touch on the record, because the tune that I asked him to play on, as much as Logan and Will sounded amazing on it, I ended up kind of ducking their parts out of it for the most part, and it felt like a power trio thing, and that's what I really wanted to do. And then Anthony played on the show, and it was cool for him to come around for it too, because he's not really gigging much. He actually builds guitars now. He builds some of the most beautiful guitars I've ever seen. So he went like not a totally different path, but he went a different path after we stopped playing, and that was just another one of those things like, who's like someone that the people that mean a lot to me that I would want to be on it, even though they're not out there doing stuff regularly.
And he's the reason you wound up in Philly, right?
Yeah.
Where where did you grow up, or where were you? You know.
So I grew up just outside of Ocean City, Maryland, in a town called Berlin.
Okay.
And so that was part of how Dick Dale got there, because Beach Town sort of made sense that he would gig down there every so often.
Sure.
But I went to college up by like Hershey in Harrisburg, PA, to Lebanon Valley College, and that's where I met Anthony. And we were playing in bands and doing some touring like on our spring breaks and winter breaks, and really trying to make a go of doing the band thing. And so it made sense for me to relocate to Philly after graduation. I was also working at studios, like doing internships, and then trying to get like entry level session work at a couple studios in Philly. So everything was kind of pulling me in that direction. But if it weren't for him, there's a good chance I wouldn't have ended up in Philly, because that was a big reason why I came.
Wow. Yeah. Did it feel like it when you came to Philadelphia? Did it feel like there was a scene? When I say scene, like a musical, you could get connected with musicians pretty quickly when you came to Philadelphia. Did it feel like that in the city?
It did to me. Yeah. I mean, I started working at Milk Boy when I was right out of school, and they had such a community that they built between when they were in Ardmore. And so there was like the coffee shop, and I would work there like doing live sound, and then they had a recording rig recording some of the shows there. And then I worked at the studio as well. And it was just like people would stop in to say hi, and there were bands and artists who were crossing over and playing on each other's projects, and you felt the sense of community big time. And that was like so cool for me to witness that, to see how possible it was. And I never once thought about moving after that. I mean, it just seemed like Philly had so much to offer me. It seemed like people were doing this full time and making it their lives and making happy, really great work and having fun doing it. And so it was like, well, why don't I try? Why not? Why not Philly? Because as much as I love New York, I don't think I could ever live there.
It's so expensive in New York. Not that Philly's not expensive, but New York it's like for a young person just trying to make a go from New York you're going to work 4 jobs. How do you do it?
Exactly. Yeah. It seemed out of reach, and LA is great. I love going to LA, but it's far, and it just didn't the energy of the city didn't totally vibe with me. Something about the energy of Philly was right for me. Yeah. So it just made sense. And I really never thought about leaving.
And you got connected with the right people.
First? How did you and Freddie first hook up?
We met through Aaron Brown. I'm pretty sure.
Actually, we initially met at the Dawson.
Yes, definitely. And I have known of you for a long time, and probably, we probably would have jammed together with Dawson maybe once or twice.
Exactly.
And then Aaron, Aaron Brown and I had been making music for a while, and there was a new project that we were thinking of starting, because when I first started playing with Aaron, it was kind of under his name. And then we started doing more writing. It felt more like a band. So he was the one who brought up, he was like, I've kind of, I've worked with Freddie Berman a little bit. Maybe I could see if he would be interested. And I was like, really? Freddie Berman? You think you could get him?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Stop.
And now I play with Freddie all the time. Like, this is
That's
such
great.
a cool thing.
He's blushing.
Turn it red.
I don't ever think I've seen you like blush, Fred. I like it. It's good on you, buddy. It's good on you. That's great. It's funny.
Yeah, that was a project. That was the first project.
Yeah. But you guys also, not only did you do your solo record, you guys worked on, you have that project you do with
Ron and the Hip Tones.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe there was something else that you guys were doing. Wasn't there another record I got last year that you did?
Yeah, it was probably the Right Fiction record.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
That's
right.
the project with Aaron. That's the band that formed out of that.
Right.
Okay.
And we did an album and 2 Christmas singles, EPs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's wonderful, man. Hey, so on the biz side of the record, what's happening? What are you doing with the record, though? The new record. How are you getting it out there? What are you doing? You going out to play and all those marketing promotional things? What are you doing to get it out there so people can hear it?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard. I always say, I've said this to so many people that I work with at the studio. I heard an interview that Tom Waits gave, and he was talking about making a record is like cooking like the best meal you've ever made, and then all this biz promo stuff is like doing the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
And so the dishes have to be done.
Yeah.
So I've been chipping away at it. I don't have a lot of spare time. The biggest thing for me was the show, because the show was so focused with people that wanted to show up and hear the music. And I had records ready. It was a matter of days that they were done in time. My soft wax records were amazing in printing them.
You did great.
So I have I printed up vinyl. I got some T-shirts made, and so people were into that. And then I filmed the show and did a full multi-track because the Falzer offers that. So a friend of mine came to film the show in 4K, and I just looked at the footage a little bit before hopping on. I was like, wow, this looks pretty good. I didn't really hear it. It was just his camera audio, but just looking at the footage, it looks really cool. And that night we had a live projection artist doing like live video work. And so I have his feed too. So there's potential for some live videos that I could put out to kind of keep, calling attention to the record. So I think that's the biggest thing is like, you want to just keep reminding people that it's out there. Hopefully there's some sync opportunities there because it is instrumental music. And I know that's such a tough world to get into. It's almost like winning the lottery, but I think with the right context, it could be something that would be of interest. So trying to push all that stuff on all those fronts while also being a dad, while also making records with other people, while also playing gigs. It's a lot, so it's doing as much as I can to the extent that I can.
Your show the show at the Falzer Club was when we were in Europe, right? Because I think I saw it. When was that? It was in July, obviously.
July 18th. Yeah.
Cool.
I want to add that there was a string quintet with us and before us.
Oh, cool.
That's
cool.
Oh,
really cool.
Yeah, that was great.
Not your normal, like they were like a rock and string quintet.
Right on. Oh,
I wanted to ask Brendan about one of the other songs on the album. You'd mentioned that you cut back some of the songs were too long because they were jams, and you cut them back before you released it. But you do end with like kind of an epic 8-minute track, the title track, New Moon. Every great album needs a great epic closing song, so it was a good choice. But at the end, there's a it sounds like a baby laughing. Is that your daughter on there? And what was she gets the only vocal on the album?
Right. Yeah. So it's technically not an instrumental album. That was that track. It means a lot for a lot of reasons. It was the last thing we did that night with the jam session. So we just kind of all emptied the tank on that one. And when I started to mess with it, it was like, actually, I should just keep it pretty much as it was. Like that one got the least amount of cutting up. It's almost exactly as it was played. The intro that you hear was something that Logan was just sort of fooling around with. And I turned over because I had an intern helping me that night since I was playing. So I turned around to the intern. I was like, please hit record right now. And so what you hear as the beginning is like as soon as we got into record, because there was stuff happening. We were just kind of fooling around. And then this idea emerged and we dropped into record. So the track starts as soon as I have a recording of it. And it goes pretty much the whole length of what we did that night. It's largely untouched.
Wow.
And at the end, it just felt right to name it after the album. My daughter's middle name is Moon, and she's new, so that's the namesake.
Okay.
And so it felt right for her to close it out as well. And so if it weren't for her, the record wouldn't mean as much. I wouldn't. It gave me the focus to get it done because I started the project 3 weeks before she was born. Because I knew if I didn't start it, then it'd be really hard to start it after. And so it was really interesting too, like in terms of workflow, because usually when I am working, I like to sit down and kind of get lost in mixing or editing or producing whatever it is. And during the first year of her life, when I was home with her, that was not possible. And so during nap times, I would just sneak upstairs into my home studio and just edit for an hour. And I would like get into a flow and be like really excited about something. And then she would wake up and be like, well, I have to go now. Like, this is it. And I've never worked like that before. Really interesting to be forced to work like that because it was like, it made me excited to get back to editing the next chance I got. It sort of like kept this interest going in the project. And so it was literally like, felt like whittling away at a block in very small sessions. And so that was really different for me too. And I think that I enjoyed that part of the process.
Very cool. Very cool.
Brendan, tell a story about Jamal Dean's bass.
Oh yeah. So the 7 tunes on the record were cut in that one night that we were talking about. There's 2 tunes that were not. The one is the very first tune. And so that was recorded in 2018 before I knew that I was going to do a record. And I went to see Jamal Dean Takuma play at Milk Boy downtown one night. Yeah. And I was there with a friend of mine. And after the show, we were still hanging out and the show was over and Jamal had left and we had worked together before. So he called me and he's like, hey, is there any chance you're still at the venue? And I said, yeah, actually I am. He's like, could you go check? I think I left my basses upstairs.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. So I walked upstairs and sure enough, he had brought 2 of his many bass guitars to that gig and he left them there. So I said, I'll grab these. I can return them to you. When do you need them? He's like, well, this was in the middle of the festival that he was producing. It was like 2 consecutive weekends. He was like, I won't really need those till next weekend. If you want to hold on to them, that would be fine. I said, yep, I can hold on to those. That would be fine with me. And so it was his like headless NS bass and his red, I think like his candy apple red P bass. And so I had to try to record something with them. And so the first track you hear on the record was what I recorded with those 2 bass guitars. And I just kind of made it up. I made some loops and kind of put it all together. And then I sent it to a few friends of mine who said they liked it. And I just shelved it because I had no outlet for that. But as this started coming together, it's a really short tune. It's like under 2 minutes. It kind of felt like this could be a cool opener. So I decided to open the record with that. And it's like the most kind of bass guitar indulgent track on the whole album, kind of get it out of the way for the first 2 minutes. And the reason that it's called Popcorn, which is one of my favorite parts of the story, is during the show, Jamal Dean, in the middle of a big jam that he's doing, the band was like, I think it was Calvin Weston and I want to say Mark Rebo. I think that was the band. Wow. They're just like in this crazy psychedelic thing happening. And then all of a sudden they just morph into James Brown's Popcorn.
Wow.
And they just start playing that groove. Yeah. And then the next thing you know, the place is totally packed. And then somehow this giant bag of popcorn materializes in the audience. And so this is how you know, right? I don't know how.
What perfect timing, too. That's awesome.
It was amazing. Awesome.
Wow.
And this is how you know this was pre-COVID, because telling this story now is like kind of gross, because this was like 2018. The bag popcorn gets passed around and everybody's taking a handful of it. And so Jamal Al-Din sees it and he was like, give me that popcorn. And so it makes its way up and he like takes a big fistful of it. I think he probably threw a handful out to the audience. It was just like this like amazing moment. And to be a part of that, and then like the energy that was transmitted into those bass guitars that night, you know, I was able to at least have that with me as I was doing that first track.
That's great. Cool. Good story.
Yeah. I always wonder with instrumentals, you know, where you come up with titles. I mean, I don't mean just anybody. I mean, where do so hearing stories like that, it's pretty cool. I mean, is it a challenge to come up with a title for an instrumental, or is it what it's inspired by, or obviously you mentioned New Moon in the case of your daughter, but I mean, how much thought goes into titling instrumentals? I mean, I think it's pretty important, but I've talked to a lot of other people over the years about naming instrumental titles, and they kind of feel the same way. It's like you got to call it something, which is true. You do have to call it something.
Yeah, right.
And I remember this band years ago called MJ Project. They were great. This like kind of fusion-y instrumental band. And I remember talking to them. They were like, yeah, like this one song, we were just like, let's call it Hot Dogs, because we don't know what to call it. And it's like, yeah, like you could take the silly route. And I kind of did it in a couple of places, but I also feel like because there's no lyrical content, it's kind of the only thing you have to go off of initially. And so I kind of want to try to set the stage a little bit for what you're going to hear with some sort of reference point that might inform like how you hear the instrumental. So to me, it's intentional, but I didn't lose sleep over any of the titles. That's for sure.
It's like you mentioned setting the stage, eh? My experience with instrumentals is, you know, with the Hooters even, or just listening to music that inspires it. Like Pete Rose is an instrumental, but it's like, you know, we tag it right in the beginning. Pete Rose, we do it live on the record. It's same thing. I don't know if it's an instrumental, but in the very first, you know, bar of the song, there's Eric saying Pete Rose, or Man in the Street, same thing. The Scotalites, but that was a Hooter. I don't think the Scotalites on their version of Man in the Street was said Man in the Street. They just called it Man in the Street. But the Hooters, we just like that whole Desmond Decker kind of what was that? I'm trying to remember the track of the Trigger, Desmond Decker song. I can't remember the track, but the reggae guys would always or ska dudes would always set it up, you know, Man in the Street, you know, Pete Rose, you know, it's like, there you go, you know, you gotta call it something. You said it best.
It is. It's almost like Nina Simone. The name of the song is Mississippi Goddamn, and then she plays it. You tell them what they're about to get. Yeah,
that's cool, man. But besides that, you've got your hands in a lot of other things that you're doing that are really exciting. You know, recording and producing and engineering. I don't know if it was mentioned in the podcast that you work a lot with Cyndi Lauper and Rob. You're doing a lot of that. You've been working with Charlie Hall with the Eagles, doing all that. I mean, I think, you know, I'm a big Eagles fan, so you get to spend the time with the offensive line and do some pretty cool stuff with those records. I mean, why don't you share a little bit about those projects? What are you doing with that?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff with Cyndi is evolving, and Rob really trusted me and brought me into that world, which has been so cool, because it started with working on this musical that he's writing with her. And it's sort of grown into working with her on many, many other projects, because she gets asked to do lots of things. Yeah. So it's been a really great ride the last 4+ years now, working with her on just about anything. And I've gotten the opportunity to work at like some legendary studios in New York, because a lot of times it might call for working out of a space, and she can book these studios to get stuff done, which has been amazing. So that's super cool. And I mean, doing the Eagles Christmas stuff, it's such a cool thing, because Charlie is one of the best producers that I've had the pleasure of working with. Like, he just knows how to steer stuff.
Yeah.
And when they're in it and when they're working on the record, you get the sense that they're working on it as if it's not a Christmas record, you know, and not for charity. Like, they're working on it as if it's the most serious record that you can imagine.
Oh, I imagine,
but it is for charity, and there are lots of laughs, and it is silly, and there's lots of you know, the context of it is very different from working on a regular record. And the guys are a hoot. I mean, like, these giant men come in, and just like, they have the best time, because for them, they're out of their element, but they're also very coachable, if you can imagine football players being very coachable. And so I think that they're having a lot of fun because it's something different for them to do. And then there is the context of the good cause of raising all this money for charity, and all the stuff that Connor and Jason are doing is really amazing for our city, you know? And so it's kind of a love fest. It's kind of all good doing those sessions. And this last one I actually got to play on, which was super cool too.
Yeah. Right. It's been hugely successful, right? This is going to be the third record they're going to put out, or is it the second?
This will be volume 3. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. I mean, incredible. And the albums have 10 songs on each record. So, right, you've cut
something like that. I think the second one was longer than the first.
Yeah.
And yeah, they just keep building it.
Hey, they're going to run out of songs soon. And Brendan, maybe they can cover some right fiction Christmas tunes. We got some good Christmas tunes.
There you go. Push that publishing in there, Fred.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we do enjoy Christmas tunes. We may try to do another one this year. Who knows? We got to talk about it.
Eventually, we'll have a album.
Yeah, I think so. Who's the I don't know. I mean, one thing, I met Jordan Mailata. I did something with Joe Nicolo some years back, and I remember it was before. It must be. I think it was before. Mailata was just a rookie. I don't even know if he was even playing. Maybe he was. You know, people were starting to become aware of who he was, like this guy that played rugby, and because I knew who he was, and so we were playing at this event, and he just showed up, and I remember talking to him. I think at one time, I don't know if I saw him play at the show or I saw him on TV or something. And he was playing the guitar and singing. And I said, I was like, wow, man, you like really can sing. Yep. And this is before he did any of this stuff. And I said, you know, you should think about what you're going to do, you know, after football, man. Maybe this is something that's a good career doing this. And he was like, well, I'm playing football first. But then like 2 years later or 3 years later, I see him doing the Christmas record and doing all that. I mean, he just seemed to have like a musical thing going on for himself that was it was just obvious. He had musicality.
Definitely, yeah. And getting to know him a little bit, like he's telling that has told the room before, like he grew up playing in church, and so that he's got a strong musical background. Singing, and so I think from an early age he's had music very prominent in his life, and you can hear it for sure.
Wow, some of those guys are better singers than others, but the albums have sound great, and like you said, they're so much fun. But
but you got to have them on the record, you know.
Right.
You got to have, you know, you got to have those big old offensive linemen on the record. It's great. I mean, I think it's just a very cool project, and.
It's amazing. And they're enormous. Like, the thing that I tell people about that record or those records when people ask me about it is, this is the third year now. And the first 2 years I would set up the microphones for them to sing before they were in the room. And
you gotta get ladders out there, right?
It's crazy, man. Like, I have a decent sense when a singer comes in of like, I sort of remember what their height is and I get it pretty close. And for 2 years in a row, they would walk in. I was like, well, I got to raise it another like 4 or 5 inches or whatever I thought it was. And this year, I think I just started to get it right, like of how high the mic actually needed to be for them. We actually needed to get like stands for the music stands for the lyrics to get the lyrics high enough for their sight line, because our music stands don't go high enough.
Extensions.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah. I love it.
I was going to plug, since Fred, you brought it up, I was going to plug the Right Fiction, since we got 2/3 of the band right here, and Fred and Brendan. I was going to a Christmas Market. Was that what you were talking about? The single you put out with a few different songs on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're looking to get into the Christmas season a little early, look up Right Fiction Christmas Market on Spotify or wherever you get your music. And
that was the first one we did.
Oh, you've done one since then?
Yeah, we that was 2 years ago, 2 Christmases.
Yeah, that was actually, we put that up before our actual record, like, because it just came together so quickly, and then our record came out the summer after.
And then we did a Christmas one.
Okay.
Yeah,
single, double,
it came
whatever.
upon two tracks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that was
so it's
year.
usually one original and one cover, right?
Yeah, that's kind of been the thing.
EMO, yeah.
Love it.
Fun.
Love it.
Yeah.
You guys get out and play, do some holiday shows, or?
No, we've never done. We actually haven't played. Right Fiction hasn't played a show. We started that record in February of 2020. Everybody knows what kind of happened in March of 2020. So we worked virtually for most of a year and a half, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So once COVID died down, then we started resuming in person.
Yeah, and we love doing writing sessions, and Aaron and Freddie have been really patient with me because I had just requested that. I wanted to, again, like limited bandwidth, wanted to try to, any spare bandwidth I had would kind of put towards my record. And now that that's out there, we're going to resume our writing sessions because I love getting together and writing with these guys.
It's fun.
It's really fun.
Fun.
And so, the Right Fiction will write again for sure.
Yes, and write again.
And write again.
So, but you haven't played a gig anywhere yet, though. You have never. I mean, there's like venues now, right?
We played 3 or 4 gigs.
Yeah, we've played a few.
Yeah, not in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this before. Wait, okay. I mean, are there? I'm sorry. No. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, we played more recently with Ron, and than we have with Right Fiction.
And you guys were deep into that project. You're still
trying to finish it.
Yeah, the record is almost done, and it sounds awesome. So it's just kind of a matter of finishing up.
Yeah, he's an interesting story. Andy, do you know anything about the record with Ron? When did you share a little bit about that?
I don't know the backstory or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, I think James Brown was, I think when Ron was in jail, right? It was in jail. He was in Greatersford. He had a band that James Brown signed or wanted to do a record with them.
They got signed to
They got signed, right?
Polydor, yeah.
Right.
Power of Attorney.
Yeah, right.
Prison.
And nothing happened with the record. I guess I don't know. So I was always curious about how they recorded. So they got signed. They were on jail. How did they record the record? How was that done?
They got out. I mean, it was like a very, very progressive program at the time, and even for today's time too.
Oh, like so they would let them out to record.
They did gigs.
It's like a furlough program.
Dude, they did shows. They opened for Stevie Wonder. They did Mike Douglas show.
It was like supervised like bus trips, something like that.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which is crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, thinking about it now, and just like I have the perspective of, I actually recorded an album in a prison years ago, and the amount of security and the things
you recorded a record in a prison before?
I did, yeah.
Well, you can't just like say that. There's no right by. So tell me about recording a record in a prison.
So it was a friend of mine had this program of songwriting with incarcerated gentlemen, and so he brought me in because they had all these songs that they wanted to record. So he asked me to produce it, and it was such a learning experience in so many ways. But just the nuts and bolts of getting in, you have to send what you're bringing, all the equipment, days in advance, and they have to look over the sheet. And then if you show up with anything different than what's on the sheet, it's not getting in.
I know. Yeah.
And so And then depending on what the mood is of the officer that day, they might not be in a hurry to let you in. And so for us, we had such limited time. It was like once we got through the gates and like got set up, we recorded everything in their chapel. The acoustics were really great.
Do you remember what prison it was? Do you
It was Graterford.
Graterford. Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
That's
So,
amazing.
I've talked with Ron a little bit, and
Yeah.
some of the gentlemen I worked with were serving life sentences, and I think we may know some of the same people that who may have been there at the same time. He was there much before I think any of the guys that I was working with. So the timing didn't quite work out, but I think we might have known, at least the guys that I worked with knew about power of attorney for sure. But yeah, just sort of an interesting parallel that I'm now involved with Ron's project as well.
Wow. That's a super interesting story. You brought me back. I forgot when you mentioned the prison thing. When I was really heavily involved with AA and NA, I remember a guy asked me to come speak at Holmesburg prison. And I remember, this is going back to like maybe 1980, like it was before the 90s. So it was late 80s. And I remember going in there, and Al Capone did a stint in there. And I remember walking in, and it was like all of a sudden you were back. It felt like I was in the 50s when I went in. And I remember seeing a hole, and I don't know why, but somebody said it was a bullet hole in like a window, like through the thing. It was just so weird. But I remember going in, and I had an earring. I had to take the earring out, all this kind of stuff. And, but I couldn't imagine bringing equipment into the studio and doing that. That's awesome, man.
It was a lot. I mean, just, setting up a studio every single time you went in there to try to get the record done. Yeah, it was a lot, but it was really interesting.
I think those guys actually recorded at Sigma, or at least some of the records.
Some of them, yeah. Ron said for some reason they recorded a lot of it at the record plant. For some reason they wanted to do it in New York.
New York.
I think he said they did some promo, like a video or something at Sigma, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, that record is a collectible. Like that's, Max knows all about that stuff. He knows way more about that world than me, but it's a cool record. And him and I actually did a reissue 45 of two of the tunes a few years ago. We like remixed them from the original tapes, which was a really awesome experience too.
What about the record that you recorded? Is that anywhere around to be found?
Yes, it is out there. There's sort of an interesting story with that I won't get into in this platform, but the takeaway was that it was a life-changing experience for me to work on that project. And it was.
Well, you see people that are like incarcerated. Well, at the time they think for life, and they're they are playing lights out, and that's their freedom. That's amazing. That's remarkable. That story about Ron too, and that band. I've heard some of that stuff. I think it's really fantastic. I think you're doing a great job with all that. It's really, really great. It's good.
Thanks.
It's good.
Yeah, it's been a really rewarding project. I mean, just trying to, we're not trying to recreate the sound, like the Philly soul sound. We're like trying to nod at it. Like it actually, it checks those boxes, but it also has to sound relevant today too. So it's interesting to try to find where that line is.
Yeah.
And so in the production, there's a lot of things that we've experimented with to try to toe that line. Cause it's, in some ways, you want it to sound like it came out in 1973, but in other ways you don't. And kind of no matter what, it's going to sound like what it sounds like. But yeah, it's been a cool process, and we're trying to do it the right way with including a lot of the right people, and even on the authenticity tip, like Max brought in a few of the Sigma engineers who are still around and still in the area, and I think there were 4 of them that came in to mix a song each with me, and so those guys know that sound, and they helped me dial it in for a few of those tunes, and that was a great learning experience too.
I bet. Amazing. What's next? What's next up for you? What are you
trying to just get back into the normal routine, really? Like there were a few records that have been kind of paused because of my show, and I just did a kind of a long stint with Cyndi where everything was on hold. So I'm kind of getting back to some projects that were already cooking, and then I've got a few new things that are going to be starting up this fall. So, I mean, you know how it is. It's just a bunch of projects in various stages of completion, but that's how I like it. You know, there's always something to tinker with.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and then I'm kind of swirling around in my head the concept for the next Peace Fortress record, because yeah, it was so fun to do, and I really fell in love with the process of doing like the jam thing, and then taking that raw material and like messing with it, and then adding stuff. And I think I could go even deeper into that process next time, whenever it feels right. But yeah, and then getting back together with Right Fiction is going to be really cool, just to write and play in a band again, because that's always fun.
Yeah, you know, you talked about that process of jamming and then cutting it down and making music. Miles Davis stuff with Teo Macero, that's how they did it. They jammed for hours,
right?
Hours, and Teo, he made songs.
Yeah. Sly Stone did the same thing.
Really?
Sly Stone did a lot of his, like, you know, I mean, unfortunately, he would go way down the rabbit hole with a bunch of other stuff, but he used to just record and then, you know, then put it together and then have different guys come in, and same thing.
That makes sense.
You know, Joel Sullivan wrote this great book I just read over the summertime. He's the guy that wrote the book on Jim Gordon. But same guy, and a brilliant book on Jim. And then he wrote this book on Sly, but he used all the guys that played in the band, and they all told their version of the. You know how you can have 4 people experience the same thing, and you'll hear 3 different stories. Right. You know what I mean? I mean, everybody may have a different view of what really was going down. But I think that was pretty brilliant, you know, the way he recorded. Yeah, of course, and Miles would do that. You know, it's kind of. I think nowadays working with Pro Tools, and it's you know, I know you have some tape machines over at Elm, but you never get a chance to jump into that. You don't record with tape anymore. Are you in that?
Sometimes I do.
You do?
Oh, right? Yeah. Those machines all work, and we use them. We don't use them to the extent that people used to use them, because we don't have to. But yeah, we use them. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. I have a 1/4-inch tape of a band that I had. I had this band called the Torpedoes years ago, when it comes guys, and I have this 1/4-inch tape of 6 songs that I found that I remember hearing one of the tracks, and I went, man, this is really good. So I got to figure a way to, I'm not sure what kind of condition the tape is in, but I got to try to bake it. I know Phil has offered to help me get it into some digitized form, but I don't know if I think about that sometimes. I'm wondering about separating the tracks and seeing it, but I'll look at it and see if I can even make it, you know, I don't want to change it, but I want to make the listening experience better, if that's possible. Even plausible, I don't know, you know.
Definitely. Yes. And you definitely want to do it sooner rather than later, because certain formulations of tape don't last
I know
as good as others. So we can talk. I'm happy to help with anything, man, because we bake it too. We have John made this like modified food dehydrator at the studio.
Oh, really?
So like it's the perfect device for baking tapes. He modified it so you can fit reels of tape in it.
Oh, no way.
But yeah, it's low heat, and you can stack reels in it. And
I think I might have even mentioned this to you before, Brendan.
Maybe we've talked about it.
Yeah. This is something that I really, one day somebody played, there was a song called Walk Away that they put on, that was on a record, the Hometown thing. And I heard it and I went, oh my God. It was like you hear stuff and I was like, oh man, that's really pretty good. You know, like when you talked about pulling something out, you don't know what you're going to hear. I heard it. I remember doing those sessions and not even hearing my bass drum, like not hearing what I played and not knowing. And then like I was horrified with thinking about hearing it back and going, oh my God, actually I felt like it was in the right place, but it, you know, nothing like going, oh, it was in the right place, you know?
Yeah. Maybe it's okay.
Yeah. That's a great feeling. You know, when you talked about that, I realized that I've experienced stuff like that. It's very cool. That's cool. Well, listen, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on, you know, and talking about, you know, your record and what you're doing. So if people want to find out more about what you're doing, how do people go about doing that? What's your social media stuff and thing like that? What's that all about there, Brendan?
I got all that stuff like you have to do. I have my website, which is just BrendanMcGeehan.com.
There it is.
Oh, look, you're on top
Rich
of it.
is quick on the trigger. Yep.
Nice.
So
I usually post, I have like a gig section. So I post gigs there. I have a blog there. So I use that to like reflect on projects that have recently come out when I have time to write a little bit about that.
Cool.
So like people, and then I have a discography section so people can hear projects that I'm working on. And then I've got the Peace Fortress stuff is on Instagram, Peace Fortress Music. And then I have a Bandcamp where you can listen and get the vinyl and all the other stuff that I have on offer. So yeah,
I got to say, your website's very impressive. I mean, it's you go on some websites. For some people, I've been no names, but I'll go to research, for the podcast, and websites are pretty bare bones. But you got a lot of good stuff on there.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was another great drummer did that. No, Alec Meltzer is a great drummer that I played with, and he's a web guy. And I came to him because my website was okay before that, but it was starting to get really dated. And one of the biggest things, I had this concept for the discography section where you could like filter out stuff because I wanted to be able to like show what the different things I did on different records. And he was like, sure, I think I could write a code for that. And he was so game to do it. Wow, so cool. Yeah, he was awesome. He set up the whole thing.
That's amazing.
Very cool.
Very, very cool. Very cool.
Love to the drummers.
Yeah. Yeah. I got you. Very, very cool. Well, anything else, fellas? Anything else to add?
I was just curious. We only have like 2 minutes left, 2-3 minutes, but I always love hearing like, the influences and the when you're starting out. So you mentioned Dick Dale. Was there anybody else that really you latched onto as a kid getting into music?
Oh, big time, man. I mean, like Zappa was huge. Miles Davis was huge. Hendrix was like the thing that opened up the gate to me to everything else. And then in the bass world, it was Jamerson, Jocko, Flea. I was on a big Marcus Miller kick for a while as a young bass player. So all those guys were like in orbit for me. Those were like some of my favorite things to listen to growing up. When
did you start playing bass? Were you really young when you started? Or?
I was in middle school. Yeah, my first instrument was trumpet, and I was in jazz band, and there were a couple of guys jamming, and they needed a bass player, and I was like, that looks fun.
Yeah. And you dug in. That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. Well,
this is great. Well, Brendan, best of luck with the album.
Yes.
It's called New Moon. Peace Fortress is the name of the project. So everybody listening to this should go check it out after you're done because it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much for joining us, Brendan. You're a busy guy, so I really appreciate, and we all appreciate you coming to spend an hour with us and tell the peeps what you're up to. And we'll get it out there on our social media and share it and help you as much as we can. We know how difficult it is to get a record out there and, promote it. And I understand that. So, I wanted to help out as much as I could. So
I really appreciate it.
We're in your corner, my friend.
Thank you. No, I've really an honor to be on here. I listen to the show regularly. I love the guests that you have. So it's really cool for me to be on here.
Well, you're on, baby. You're on. Great. Well, Andy, you want to take us out?
I'll wrap it up. Thanks to Brenden McGeehan for joining us for the last hour. Again, check out New Moon by Peace Fortress. Thanks to Rich in the studio for making it all work as usual. For Dave and Fred, I'm Andy, and we'll see you next time on In the Pocket.
David Uosikkinen's In the Pocket is sponsored by the School of Rock Main Line. I'd like to thank the School of Rock Main Line, located at 511 Old Lancaster Road in Berwyn. You can visit their website at schoolofrock.com. Ask for Dave Marsh or Rick Allison.